I need to tell you something before I get to the part where my own daughter calculated the cost of keeping me alive against the price of a kitchen remodel she'd been wanting since spring. My name is Ray Calloway. I'm 63 years old. I spent 31 years building a commercial flooring business in Asheville, North Carolina. Calloway, contract floors. Started with one beat-up van, a used buffer, and a stack of business cards I printed at the Kinko's on Marymount Avenue. By the time I turned 55, I had 6 crews, a warehouse off Sweeten Creek Road, and contracts with 3 hospital systems across western North Carolina. I built that company the way you build anything worth keeping slowly, without shortcuts, and with your name on every inch of it. I never remarried after Carol passed. Breast cancer. 14 months from diagnosis to the end, and I spent every one of those months sitting next to her hospital bed, reading her chapters from whatever paperback she'd picked out that week. When she died, she left behind our daughter, Melissa, who was 22, and her son from her first marriage, Derek, who was 19. Derek's biological father had been out of the picture since Derek was 4, so I was it. Had been since Derek was 9 years old, and I married his mother in a small ceremony in her sister's backyard in Weaverville. I want you to understand what kind of man I was before any of this happened. Not because I need you to feel sorry for me, but because what I'm about to tell you doesn't make sense unless you know who was in that hospital room. Derek came to work with me summers during high school. I taught him to read a blueprint, how to price a commercial bid, how to talk to a general contractor without flinching when they tried to squeeze your margin. When he was 24, I made him my operations manager. Gave him a salary that most men twice his age in this industry would have been grateful for. 3 years ago, when his wife Pamela got pregnant with their second child, and they wanted to buy a house over in Arden, I co-signed their mortgage. My credit, my risk, my name on the paper. Melissa is mine by blood and by everything else. She married a man named Garrett whose family money comes from a furniture distribution company out of Hickory. They live in a house in Reynolds Mountain that would make most people's eyes water. I put $40,000 toward their wedding, every dime of it, because Carol would have wanted that, and because I loved my daughter. And then there's the shop. In the back corner of my warehouse, behind the flooring samples and the equipment bays, I kept a 1971 Chevrolet C10 pickup that I'd been restoring for 11 years. Cherry red. Custom rebuilt 350 engine. Original chrome bumpers that I sourced from a parts dealer in Tennessee who specialized in nothing else. My crew called it the Red Ghost because they'd come in on Monday mornings and find fresh work done on it, and nobody would know I'd been there Saturday night with a coffee thermos and a socket set. A man named Ellis Pruitt, a retired contractor who collected pre-1975 trucks up in Mars Hill, had been after me about that C10 for 4 years running. His standing offer was $68,000. Every time he brought it up, I gave him the same answer. That truck stays in my shop until my hands are too old to hold a wrench. Then it stays in my shop anyway. I meant that. Now, let me back up a little further, because the story starts on a Thursday morning in March, not in a warehouse and not with a truck. I was on a job site over in Hendersonville, inspecting an epoxy pour in a new medical office building when the room went sideways. Not gradually, not like a warning. 1 second I was crouching down to check a seam, and the next second the floor was coming up to meet my face, and my left arm felt like someone had shoved a hot iron rod from my elbow to my shoulder. My foreman, a man named Pete Hodges, who has worked for me for 19 years, caught me before I hit the concrete. He called 911 while I was still trying to tell him it was nothing. He didn't listen. That's one of the things I've always liked about Pete. The paramedics told me in the ambulance what my body had already figured out. Major cardiac event. Partial blockage in the left anterior descending artery. In the ER at Pardee, the cardiologist on call, a young woman named Dr. Ewan, didn't soften the delivery. "Mr. Calloway, you need an intervention, and you need it soon. The blockage is significant enough that we want you in a specialized cardiac center within 48 hours. She told me about a team in Charlotte, a cardiac surgery group with a 90% success rate on cases like mine, but they required a $65,000 deposit to hold the surgical slot. Insurance would cover a substantial portion eventually, but the timing gap meant the deposit had to be secured in full before they would schedule. $65,000, 48 hours. Melissa was in the room when Dr. Ewan explained this. She was holding my hand so tight I could feel my pulse against her grip. She looked at me and said what I needed her to say. Daddy, we handle this tonight. We will figure this out tonight. Don't you worry about the money. I believed her. I want to be clear about that. When your daughter looks you in the eye and says, don't worry about the money, you believe her. You have to. That's the only version of the world that makes sense when you're lying in a hospital bed with monitoring leads stuck to your chest and a view of a parking garage out the window. They released me home for 36 hours to rest and stabilize before the Charlotte transfer. Sent me home with a blood pressure cuff, a cardiac monitor, a list of restrictions, and instructions to stay calm and avoid exertion. Melissa set me up in my bedroom with a baby monitor receiver on my nightstand so she could hear me from the kitchen if I called. She and Derek had both driven over that evening, the four of us eating takeout soup in my bedroom like it was some kind of vigil, which, I suppose, it was. I want to tell you, I slept soundly that night. I didn't. I lay there listening to my own heartbeat, like a man listening to a car engine he suspects is about to seize. Somewhere around 9 o'clock the next morning, I woke from a half-sleep to the sound of voices downstairs. Melissa, Derek, and Garrett, Melissa's husband. I could hear them in the kitchen, the low sound of a serious conversation. The kind where people keep their voices down not because they don't want to wake you, but because they don't want you to hear. The baby monitor was still on. I want you to sit with that for a second. I hadn't turned it off. Neither had Melissa. The receiver was right there on my nightstand, that small white box with the little green power light blinking steady. And through it, quiet but perfectly clear, I could hear every word coming up from my own kitchen. I heard Garrett first. His voice has always had that particular quality of a man who has never had to ask for anything twice and knows it. Mel, before you commit to anything, I need us to think through the numbers on this. My hand was resting on the blanket 6 inches from that receiver. I didn't touch it. 65,000 is not nothing, Garrett went on. And his insurance reimbursement timeline is what? 3 to 6 months? We'd be floating that gap ourselves. And I'm not sure this is the right time, with the kitchen renovation already contracted. I lay there as still as I've ever been in my life. Derek's voice came in next. Practical, measured. The tone he uses in business meetings when he's about to suggest something nobody wants to be the first to say. Look, I love Ray. You both know that. But we have to be realistic. He's 63, he has a significant cardiac history now, and the survival rate for this procedure, even at 90%, means 1 in 10 people don't walk out of that hospital. I'm not saying that to be cruel. I'm saying that if the worst happens, Melissa is out $65,000 and we're all absorbing that hit for nothing. Nothing. The word landed like something physical. The kitchen was quiet for a moment. Then Melissa's voice, low and tight in a way I recognized from when she was a little girl trying not to cry. I know all of that. But he's my father. Garrett again, gentler now, the voice of a man managing a situation. And he will always be your father, Mel. Nothing changes that. We're not saying abandon him. We're saying explore every other option first. His company has assets, the warehouse, equipment. There may be business financing options he hasn't looked at. There may be ways to structure this that don't put our family at personal risk. Our family. I noticed that word. Not your father. Our family. The family that lived in Reynolds Mountain with the view of the mountains and the kitchen that needed renovating. Then Derek said the thing that changed everything. And, honestly, he said, his voice dropping a half step like a man saying what he actually thinks instead of what sounds decent, if Ray's business has the assets to cover this, it should cover it. That's what a business is for. Why should Melissa's personal finances take the hit when he has a company worth considerably more than $65,000? Let the business handle the business. That's not cold. That's just smart. Let the business handle it. From the man whose operations manager salary came from that business. From the man whose mortgage I co-signed with the credit that business helped me build. I lay in that bed for a long time after that. Didn't move. Didn't press the button. Didn't make a sound. Because I had learned something important just then, something I couldn't unlearn, and I needed every word of it to finish before I did anything at all. Downstairs, the conversation shifted. They started talking about timelines, about insurance claims, about whether I had a financial advisor who could look at the business assets quickly, practical, organized. The way you talk about a problem you've decided to solve with someone else's resources. Not once, in the 40 minutes I lay there listening, did anyone say, "We will find the money." Not once. Eventually, I heard Melissa's footsteps on the stairs. She came in, sat on the edge of my bed, and held my hand the same way she had in the hospital room. Her eyes were tired. There was something in her face that she was working to keep out of her voice. "Daddy," she said, "I called First Community this morning about a personal loan. They said the timeline for approval on something this size is too tight." She paused. I looked at her, and I thought about 31 years of watching this girl grow up. I thought about Carol, who would have sold the house itself before she let me lie in a hospital and debate my own survival rate. And I nodded slowly. "Okay, sweetheart," I said. "I'll figure it out." She squeezed my hand. "I love you, Daddy." "I know you do," I said. I wasn't sure anymore whether that was true, but it was the kindest thing I could offer us both right then. After she left, I lay in that room for a long time. My chest ached. The monitor on the nightstand blinked its steady green. Outside the window, the March light was gray and flat over the ridge. I did what I've always done when a job looks impossible. I took stock of what I actually had. I had a company. I had equipment. I had 6 crews and a warehouse and 31 years of relationships with contractors all over western North Carolina. And in the back of that warehouse, under a canvas cover, I had a 1971 Chevrolet C10 with a rebuilt 350 engine and original chrome bumpers that a man in Mars Hill had been trying to buy from me for 4 years. I picked up my phone. My hands were steadier than they had any right to be. I found Ellis Pruitt's number. He answered on the second ring. He was not the kind of man who let calls go to voicemail. "Ellis," I said, "the C10. Is 68 still where you are?" A pause. Then, "Ray Calloway. Are you actually calling me about that truck right now?" "I am." Another pause. Shorter. "He's a man who doesn't waste time when a decision is already made. I'll go 70. Cash. Cashier's check. I can have my guy there, with a trailer by end of business tomorrow. $70,000. 11 years of Saturday mornings. Every coffee thermos I'd drained sitting on a creeper under that frame. The chrome bumpers sourced from Tennessee. The paint job that took 3 tries to get right. "Done," I said. "End of business tomorrow." He didn't ask why. Men like Ellis Pruitt don't ask why when the answer is already obvious. He just said, "Get better, Ray. That truck'll be here if you ever want her back." "I won't," I said, "but I appreciate it." I hung up and lay back against the pillow. Outside, the gray March light sat on the ridge. Inside, a baby monitor blinked green on my nightstand. I had paid for my own life. Now I intended to live it on entirely different terms. The procedure in Charlotte took 6 hours. Dr. Marcelino, lead surgeon, came out afterward and told them the blockage had been cleared completely and my heart function was better than expected given the severity of the event. He used the word fortunate. Melissa cried in the waiting room. Derek shook the doctor's hand. Garrett checked his phone. I know that last part because Melissa told me later, not meaning to, not realizing what she'd said. Recovery was 8 weeks. Cardiac rehab, restricted activity, daily medication. Pete ran the business without missing a beat. He's been doing it long enough to run it without me on my best days, let alone my worst. And in those 8 weeks, while I walked slow laps around my neighborhood and ate the food Melissa brought over twice a week and slept more than I'd slept in 30 years, I watched my family with new eyes. The kind of eyes you develop when the fog of trust burns off and the landscape underneath shows itself. Derek stopped by once in 8 weeks. Once. To drop off paperwork about a vendor contract that needed my signature. He stayed 11 minutes. I know because I was watching the clock on the wall above his head. He didn't ask how the recovery was going. He asked whether I'd thought about what we were going to do about the warehouse lease renewal coming up in the fall. Melissa came more often. She brought food, she sat with me, she asked about my follow-up appointments. But something had shifted in the air between us. She was attentive the way a person is attentive when they're managing a situation, rather than loving a father. Small thing. The kind of thing you might not notice if you hadn't spent 40 minutes listening through a baby monitor to your daughter and her husband run a cost-benefit analysis on your life. One afternoon, she was sitting at my kitchen table scrolling through something on her phone while I was having a slow moment after my rehab walk. I asked her to hand me the pill organizer on the counter. She said just a second and kept scrolling, finished whatever she was reading, then got up and handed it to me. Just a second. 2 months after I'd sold an 11-year restoration project at midnight to keep a surgical slot open. Just a second. I noted it. I didn't say anything. I just noted it. The dinner was Melissa's idea. She called it a recovery celebration. She said she wanted to cook a full meal at my house, invite Derek and Pamela and Garrett, make it a real family evening. You deserve it, Daddy, she said on the phone. We all want to celebrate you being okay. I told her it sounded wonderful. I meant it differently than she understood it. The evening came on a Friday in late May. Melissa made pot roast and roasted potatoes and a lemon cake that Carol used to make for my birthday every year. I'll give her that. She cooked a beautiful meal. The table looked the way it used to look when Carol was alive and we had people over. For about 10 minutes, I let myself sit inside that feeling and just breathe it in. Then Derek set his fork down and looked at me with the expression of a man who's been wading through the appetizers to get to the real agenda. Ray, he said, I've been meaning to bring up the warehouse lease. October is closer than it looks, and Bridgewater Commercial is going to want our renewal decision by July. I think we have a real opportunity here to renegotiate terms if we approach it right. He leaned forward. And separately, I've been looking at the Swannanoa expansion opportunity. If we move on that location, I want to revisit the partnership conversation. I think the timing is right. Partnership. He'd mentioned this once before, casually, in passing. A partnership stake in Calloway Contract Floors. His name on my company. 31 years of my company. I looked at him for a moment. Is that right? I said. I think you need someone in place long term, he said. Pete is great, but he's operational. You need someone with actual equity stake thinking about the future of this thing. He paused. Especially now, given everything. Given that I'd had a cardiac event, given that I was 63, given that the math on my future had apparently been worked out in my own kitchen while I lay one floor above it with a baby monitor on my nightstand. Garrett said nothing. He was cutting his pot roast in the precise way he does everything, focused and efficient, but he wasn't disagreeing. I reached down beside my chair and picked up the folder I'd placed there before anyone arrived. Let me share a few thoughts, I said. I set the folder on the table. The table went quiet. Derek, I said. 8 weeks ago, I sold the C10 to Ellis Pruitt for $70,000 to cover the surgical deposit in Charlotte. I want you to be aware of that, because I know you and Garrett concluded that the business should handle the business, and technically it did. Just not the part of the business either of you were thinking of. I pulled out the first document and set it on the table between the pot roast and the lemon cake. It was the bill of sale, my signature. Ellis Pruitt's name, the date the night before they drove me to Charlotte. Derek's fork stopped moving. Melissa's face went very still. I didn't touch a single cent of personal funds, I said. Not Melissa's, not Garrett's, didn't ask anyone for anything. I lay in my bed, heard what I needed to hear, and I handled it myself the way I've handled everything in my life for 31 years. I paused. I want you both to know that, because I need you to understand what I had before I tell you what I've decided to do with what's left. Garrett put his fork down, very carefully. I pulled the second document. Derek, I said, I've spent the past 8 weeks reviewing the business structure and talking with my attorney. Effective the 1st of next month, I'm transitioning Calloway Contract Floors into a sole member LLC restructured under my individual name. What that means for your role is that the operations manager position remains available to you as an at-will employee at your current salary, but the partnership conversation is closed. There is no partnership stake. There will not be a partnership stake. The company has my name on it because I built it. That's where it stays. Derek's jaw tightened. His wife Pamela put her hand on his arm. Ray, he said, his voice careful. That's not fair. I've given years to this company. I know you have, I said. And you've been compensated well for every one of them. I paid for your certification courses. I co-signed your mortgage. I made you operational head of a company I spent 3 decades building. That's not a gift I'm taking back. It's the record of what I gave you. I just stopped adding to it. He started to say something else. I held up one hand. Not dramatic. Just a signal that I wasn't finished. Melissa, I said. She was very still now. The way she used to go still as a little girl when she knew she was about to hear something she didn't want to hear. I'm making changes to my estate plan, I said. Not punitive changes. Just honest ones. The house stays as it is. The business assets are restructured as we discussed. I've made separate arrangements to ensure Pete Hodges has a long-term stake in the company's future because he has earned that. I want you to hear this from me directly rather than from an attorney down the road. She nodded once, just barely. Then I looked at both of them at once. I heard you, I said. I want you to know that. I heard the conversation in my kitchen the morning after I came home from Pardee. I heard the discussion about the kitchen renovation and the 90% survival rate and the decision to let the business handle the business. I heard every word of it. I didn't say anything then because I needed to hear what you actually believed when you thought I was asleep upstairs. And now I know. The room was completely silent except for the sound of the refrigerator hum and someone's silverware ticking against a plate as their hand trembled slightly. I'm not angry at you, I continued. I want to be clear about that. I don't think you're bad people. I think you made a calculation and you made it out loud, and I happened to hear it. And what I learned from that calculation is something I should have been honest with myself about a long time ago. I was not a father to either of you, not in the way I believed I was. I was a resource you managed well, and I managed it by telling myself it was love. Derek's chair scraped back. His voice cracked on the first word. That's not true, he said. That's not fair, Ray. I do love you. I was scared. I was trying to protect Melissa. I was being practical about a terrible situation. I know, I said. And now I'm being practical about mine. Melissa started crying then. Not loud. Just the quiet kind where the tears come before the sound catches up. She pressed her fingers to her mouth and looked at me the way she used to look at me when she was small and had done something she couldn't take back. Daddy, she said. Daddy, I'm sorry. I froze. I should have just said yes immediately. I should have never let Garrett get in my head about the money. I'm so sorry. Sweetheart, I said. And I kept my voice as gentle as I could keep it because she is my daughter, and she was Carol's daughter, and some part of me will love her until I stop breathing. I know you are. And I believe that you are. But I need you to understand something. A few months ago, I was lying in my bedroom with a monitor on my nightstand, too tired to walk down the stairs for a glass of water. And I lay there for a long time. And nobody brought me one. Not one person. That's a small thing. But it's the kind of small thing that tells you exactly where you stand. She put her head down and cried into her hands. Garrett was looking at the table. He didn't say a word. There was nothing for him to say. He had said his piece 2 months ago in a kitchen he thought no one was listening to. Derek left first. He shook my hand at the door, which told me more than anything else that had happened that evening. Not a hug. A handshake. Like we were two men who had reached the end of a professional arrangement. Maybe we had. He said he'd be in touch about the transition. I told him Pete had all the information he needed. Pamela hugged me on her way out. She said she was sorry in a way that felt genuine. I appreciated that. Garrett thanked me for dinner. I told him the pot roast was Melissa's work. He nodded and walked to the car. Melissa was the last one. She stood in my doorway for a long time. She looked like she wanted to say something that would fix it. I've seen that look before. I used to be able to give her the thing that would make that look go away. I don't have it right now, I told her. That's honest. I don't have it right now. But I'm not done with you. I want you to know that. I'm not done with you. She nodded. She hugged me carefully, the way you hug someone who has recently had their chest opened. And she walked to her car without looking back. I stood in my doorway and watched the tail lights disappear down the drive toward Reynolds Mountain. Then I went inside and washed the dishes, because somebody had to. That was 6 weeks ago. Derek is still operations manager. He comes to work every day and does his job, and we talk about contracts and scheduling and vendor pricing, and we do not talk about anything else. That's workable. I've worked alongside people I had complicated feelings about for 30 years. This is not new territory. Melissa calls me twice a week. Sometimes I answer on the first ring. Sometimes I let it go to voicemail and listen to her message later while I drink my coffee on the back porch. I'm not punishing her. I'm just recalibrating, figuring out what's real between us and what was the story I told myself because I needed it to be true. The warehouse is quieter in the mornings now. I've been coming in earlier, before the crews arrive, walking the floor the way I used to before any of this happened. I check the equipment bays. I read the bid sheets. I stand in the back corner where the red ghost used to sit under its canvas cover, and I look at the empty space for a while before I start my day. I don't regret selling it. Not for 1 second. A truck is a truck. I can find another truck. What I paid for with that truck was something no amount of money can replace once it's gone. The knowledge that when it mattered most, I took care of myself. Nobody else did. I did. Ellis Pruitt called me 2 weeks ago. Said the C10 was sitting in his barn clean and well covered, and if I ever wanted her back at the same price, he'd sign the title over same day. I told him I appreciated that more than he knew. I told him I'd think about it. I'm thinking about it. People ask me, the few people I've told any of this to, whether I'm bitter, whether I'm angry, whether I feel like the family I spent 20 years building turned out to be a house built on sand. I tell them this. I spent 20 years building something I believed in. I was wrong about some of what I was building. That's a painful thing to find out at 63. But I've been wrong before, and I've rebuilt before, and the skills don't change just because the material is different. I also tell them this. There's a lesson I learned in 8 weeks of cardiac rehab that I didn't expect to learn there. The physical therapist told me on my first day that the heart, after a major event, sometimes comes back stronger than it was before. Not always. Not automatically. Only if you do the work. Only if you show up every day and put in what it asks of you. I've been showing up every day. My heart is stronger than it was in March. The cardiologist confirmed it last month. Better flow, better function, better numbers across the board. I paid $70,000 for that. I paid it with 11 years of Saturday mornings and a canvas cover and a phone call to a man in Mars Hill at whatever time it was that night, with the gray light coming through my bedroom window and a baby monitor blinking green on my nightstand. Worth every cent. The garage at home is empty most nights. I leave the light off in there now. But some mornings, before I drive to the warehouse, I'll stand in the garage doorway for a minute with my coffee, and I'll feel the quiet in that space, and I'll think about the thing I traded and the thing I got back. And then I drive to work, and I start my day. And I run the company that has my name on it because I built it, and I intend to keep building it on my own terms, for as long as my newly repaired heart has any interest in beating. The people who should have fought for me didn't, so I fought for myself. That's not a tragedy. That's just what happens when a man finally stops waiting for someone else to do the thing he was always going to have to do himself. You already know someone who needed to hear that. Think of them. And if you're still here, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I'll see you on the next one.